My friend called me selfish for wanting my cabin back. Now she's left with nothing. I bought my vacation cabin 8 years ago with money I saved from working double shifts for nearly a decade. It was a 2-bedroom place by a lake about 3 hours from my apartment in the city. Nothing fancy, but it was mine and I loved it. I went there every other weekend to fish and read and forget about work. It was the one place where I could completely relax. My friend Greta knew about the cabin because I talked about it constantly. We'd been friends since our mid-20s and she always said she wanted to visit someday. Last spring, she asked if she could stay there for a week while she figured some things out. She said she was going through a rough patch with her landlord and needed space to clear her head. I said of course. I gave her the spare key and told her to enjoy the peace and quiet. That was 11 months ago. Greta never left. The first month, she said she just needed a little more time. Her landlord situation was worse than she thought and she was looking for a new apartment, but the market was terrible. I said okay, and told her to take another few weeks. The second month, she said she found a place, but it fell through at the last minute. She asked if she could stay until she found something else. I said fine, but I wanted to come up for a weekend soon. She said that would be awkward since she was living there now and needed privacy. I reminded her it was my cabin. She said she knew, but she was going through a lot and having me there would stress her out. I let it go because I didn't want to fight. By month 3, Greta stopped asking permission and started acting like she owned the place. She told me she rearranged the furniture because the layout didn't make sense. She said she threw out some of my old fishing gear because it was taking up space. She mentioned she gave my number to a handyman to fix the porch steps, and I should expect a bill. I asked when she was planning to move out. She said she was working on it, but these things take time. She said I should be grateful someone was taking care of the property while I was busy in the city. Month 4 is when I drove up unannounced. Greta had completely transformed my cabin. My furniture was in the shed. Her stuff was everywhere. She'd painted the bedroom without asking. She had mail coming to my address with her name on it. When I walked in, she acted annoyed that I didn't call first. She said I couldn't just show up at someone's home without warning. I told her it was my home. She said it was complicated now and we should talk about boundaries. I asked her directly when she was leaving. She said she had nowhere to go and I had a perfectly good apartment in the city, so why did I need 2 places anyway? She said I was being selfish. She said real friends share what they have. I drove home that night and couldn't sleep. I spent the next week researching my options. Formal eviction would take months and cost money. Greta knew that. She was counting on me not wanting the hassle. She was counting on me being too nice to do anything about it. She was wrong. I started with the utilities. The cabin was in my name and I paid all the bills. I called the electric company and had the power transferred to a new account that required someone to be present to activate. Greta called me furious, saying the lights went out. I told her there must be an issue with the grid and she should contact the utility company. She did. They told her the account was closed and the property owner would need to set up new service. She called me again demanding I fix it. I said I'd get around to it when I had time. Then I did the same thing with water and gas. One by one, the utilities got shut off. Greta called me constantly saying I was being petty. I said I was just reorganizing my accounts. She said she couldn't live without running water. I said she couldn't live in my cabin without my permission either, but here we were. She bought a generator and bottled water. She was determined to outlast me. So I made things worse. I told the internet company I was selling the property and needed to cancel service. Greta lost Wi-Fi. I told the trash collection service to stop coming. Greta's garbage piled up. I called the propane company and said I wouldn't be needing deliveries anymore. Greta couldn't heat the cabin when the temperature dropped. She called me screaming that I was trying to freeze her out. I told her she was free to leave whenever she wanted. She said she had rights. I said she had a key I gave her for 1 week 11 months ago and nothing else. Then I got creative. I looked up property lawyers in my area and found Lynette Kane. My coworker said she handled his rental dispute last year and got results fast. I called her office on Monday morning and got an appointment for that same afternoon. Her office was in a small building downtown with parking in the back. I walked in and told the receptionist I was there to see Lynette. She led me down a hall to a corner office where Lynette sat behind a desk covered in folders and legal papers. Lynette was maybe 50 with short gray hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She shook my hand and told me to sit down. I explained the whole situation from the beginning. I told her about giving Greta the key for 1 week and how that turned into 11 months. I told her about the utilities I shut off and how Greta bought a generator and refused to leave. I told her about my furniture in the shed and the bedroom Greta painted without asking. Lynette listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. She said Greta had absolutely zero legal claim to my property. No lease meant no tenant rights. No rental agreement meant no protections. The key I gave her was permission for a temporary stay that ended the moment I asked for it back. Everything I did with the utilities was completely legal since all the accounts were in my name. Lynette said I could shut off every single service and Greta couldn't do anything about it. Then she suggested one more thing that made me smile for the first time in weeks. She told me to contact my homeowner's insurance company and report an unauthorized occupant. That would suspend my coverage until the situation got resolved. Without insurance, any damage or injury on the property became Greta's personal problem. If someone got hurt, Greta could be sued directly. If something broke, Greta would be liable. Lynette said it was brilliant because it put all the risk on Greta instead of me. I thanked her and paid for the consultation. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. The next morning, I called my insurance company. I told them someone was living in my vacation property without permission, and I needed to report it. The agent asked a bunch of questions about how long Greta had been there and whether I tried to remove her. I answered everything honestly. The agent said they would suspend my coverage immediately and send me a letter confirming it. She said I should send a copy of that letter to the unauthorized occupant so she understood the situation. I thanked her and hung up. The letter arrived 3 days later. I made 2 copies and sent one to Greta by certified mail so I'd have proof she received it. The letter was very clear. It said my homeowner's insurance was suspended due to unauthorized occupation. It said any damage, injury, or liability on the property was now the responsibility of the current occupant. It said the coverage would not be restored until the unauthorized person vacated. I imagined Greta opening that envelope and reading those words. I imagined her face when she realized what it meant. She called me 2 days after the certified mail got delivered. I saw her name on my phone and almost didn't answer, but I wanted to hear this. I picked up and said hello. Greta was talking so fast I could barely understand her at first. She said I couldn't do this to her. She said the insurance letter meant she could be sued if anything happened. She said what if a tree fell on the cabin or the porch collapsed or someone got hurt visiting? She said she didn't have money for a lawsuit. She said I was putting her in danger on purpose. I waited until she stopped talking. Then I said very calmly that she was exactly right. Any damage or injury was now her problem. Maybe she should think about finding somewhere else to live where she actually had legal protection and insurance coverage. Greta started yelling that I was trying to force her out. I said yes, I was, because it was my cabin and she had no right to be there. She hung up on me. I set my phone down and went back to eating dinner. That weekend, my sister Imogen drove up to the cabin with me. I wanted to see what was happening, but I didn't want to go alone. Imogen brought coffee for the drive and we talked about everything except Greta for the first hour. Then as we got closer, she asked what I thought we'd find. I said I had no idea, but I was ready for anything. We pulled onto the dirt road leading to my property and I saw Greta's car immediately. It was parked right in front of the cabin like always. Garbage bags were piled up near the shed because trash collection had stopped weeks ago. The generator sat on the porch running loud enough that I could hear it from the car. Imogen and I got out and walked closer but stayed on the driveway. I could see the cabin looked worse than I remembered. The porch steps Greta had fixed were already coming loose again. The windows were dirty. There was mud tracked all over the front area. Imogen squeezed my hand and said she was sorry this happened to my beautiful retreat. I squeezed back and said I was going to get it back no matter what it took. We stood there for a few more minutes just looking. Then we got back in the car and drove home. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered and a man's voice said his name was Austin Strong. He said he was the handyman Greta hired months ago to fix the porch steps. He said he just found out I was the actual owner and Greta had no right to hire him. He felt terrible about the bill he sent me. He said if he'd known the truth, he never would have done the work. I told him it wasn't his fault and Greta lied to everyone. Austin said he wanted to make it right somehow. He offered to go document the current condition of the property for free and send me photos of everything. He said he could get pictures of the damage and any changes Greta made. I said that would be incredibly helpful. He said he'd go over there tomorrow when Greta went into town for groceries. I thanked him and gave him my email address for the photos. Austin sent the photos the next evening. There were maybe 30 pictures total. I opened them one by one and felt my anger building with each image. The walls had huge scrapes and dents from where Greta moved furniture around. The hardwood floors in the living room had dark stains that looked like water damage. The bedroom she painted was sloppy with drips on the baseboards. But the worst photos were of the shed. Austin had opened it up and found my fishing equipment thrown in a heap in the corner. My expensive rods were bent. My tackle boxes were open with everything spilled out. Everything was covered in moisture and some of it was already rusting. I had spent years collecting that gear. Greta had destroyed it in months. I saved all the photos in a folder on my computer. I forwarded them to Lynette with a note saying I wanted to pursue damages when this was over. She wrote back saying the documentation was perfect, and we'd definitely use it. I decided to try something different. I called the county tax assessor's office and asked to update my mailing address for property tax bills. The woman on the phone asked for my property information, and I gave her everything. She asked what address I wanted the bills sent to going forward. I gave her my apartment address in the city instead of the cabin. She said she'd update it in the system and the next bill would go there. I thanked her and hung up. A few weeks later, the property tax bill arrived at my apartment. I made a copy and mailed it to the cabin address with a note that said this was official county mail showing who owned the property. I wanted Greta to see my name on that tax bill. I wanted her to see the county recognized me as the legal owner. I wanted her to know she had no claim at all. Greta sent me a long text message a few days after that. She said she talked to a tenant rights organization, and they told her she might have squatters' rights. She said 11 months of continuous occupation could give her legal claim to the property. She said I couldn't just kick her out after she'd been living there that long. She said she had rights whether I liked it or not. I took a screenshot of the text and forwarded it to Lynette. Lynette called me an hour later laughing. She said squatters' rights required 5 to 10 years of occupation depending on what state you were in. She said Greta would also need to pay property taxes and meet a bunch of other requirements she definitely hadn't met. She said 11 months meant absolutely nothing legally. She said Greta was grasping at straws and probably knew it. Lynette said it was time to send Greta an official letter from her law office. The letter went out the next day on Lynette's law firm letterhead. It was 2 pages long and very detailed. It explained exactly why Greta had no legal claim to my cabin. It listed all the requirements for squatters' rights and showed how Greta met none of them. It stated that her continued occupation was criminal trespass. It gave her 14 days to vacate the property voluntarily. It said if she didn't leave, we would pursue formal eviction proceedings and sue for damages to the property. Lynette sent it certified mail just like the insurance letter. Greta would have to sign for it. She'd have proof she received it and understood the deadline. During those 14 days, I started planning. I called a locksmith and asked how much it would cost to change all the locks on the cabin. He gave me a price and I scheduled him for day 13. I needed Greta to be gone when he came. I called Austin and asked if he knew Greta's schedule. He said she usually went to the grocery store on Thursday afternoons and stayed gone for a few hours. Perfect. I told the locksmith to meet me at the cabin that Thursday at 2. Austin said he'd drive by that morning to confirm Greta left. Thursday came and Austin texted me at noon saying Greta just drove away. I got in my car and headed to the cabin. The locksmith met me right on time. He changed every single lock in under an hour. Front door, back door, shed, everything. While he worked, I went through the cabin and gathered all of Greta's belongings. I packed everything neatly into boxes and bags. I carried it all out to the porch and stacked it carefully. When the locksmith finished, I paid him and he left. I wrote a note on a piece of paper saying Greta could collect her belongings anytime, but she was no longer welcome inside. I taped it to the front door. Then I locked up with my new keys and drove home. I got back to my apartment around 8 that night and made myself dinner. I kept checking my phone every few minutes waiting for Greta to call. She had to know by now that she couldn't get inside. The locks were changed and all her stuff was sitting on the porch getting cold in the night air. Around 9:30, my phone finally rang. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Greta was screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She said I couldn't just throw her out without any notice. She said what I did was illegal, and she was going to sue me. She said I was a horrible person and a terrible friend. I waited until she stopped yelling, and then I spoke very calmly. I reminded her that Lynette sent her an official letter 2 weeks ago, giving her 14 days to leave. I reminded her that before that letter, I'd been asking her nicely for 11 months to move out. I told her she'd had plenty of notice, and she chose to ignore it. Greta started yelling again, saying the letter didn't count because it came from some lawyer she'd never heard of. I told her the letter came from a real attorney on real law firm paper, and it absolutely counted. She said she was calling the police right now to report me for illegal eviction. I told her to go ahead. I said I would love for the police to come look at Lynette's letter and my property deed and all the documentation showing I owned the cabin. I said they could also look at the fact that she'd been living there without paying rent or having any kind of lease agreement. Greta went quiet for a minute. Then she hung up without saying anything else. I sat on my couch waiting to see if the police would actually show up at my apartment. They never did. Greta didn't call them because she knew she didn't have a case. 2 days later, I was at work when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. The message said it was Greta's brother, and he was at the cabin with a truck to pick up her things. He asked if that was okay. I texted back saying yes and thanked him for letting me know. About an hour later, he called me directly. He said he got everything loaded up and he wanted to apologize. He said he had no idea Greta had pulled something like this. He said she told the family she was renting my cabin and paying me every month. He said when he found out the truth, he was disgusted with his sister. He told me Greta was staying with their parents now and they were really mad about the whole situation. He said his parents were making Greta pay them rent, and she was complaining about it constantly. I thanked him for being decent about everything, and we hung up. It felt good knowing that at least someone in Greta's family understood how messed up this whole thing was. That weekend, I drove up to the cabin with Imogen. I wanted her there when I saw the damage for the first time with everything out in the open. We pulled up around noon, and I unlocked the front door with my new key. The smell hit me immediately. It was this mix of old garbage and mildew and something else I couldn't identify. Imogen covered her nose and mouth with her hand. We walked through the main room, and I started making a list on my phone of everything that needed fixing. The furniture Greta brought in was gone since her brother took it, but my original furniture was still in the shed, and I didn't know what condition it would be in. The walls had marks and scratches from where she moved things around. The hardwood floor had dark stains in 3 different spots that looked like she spilled something and never cleaned it up. We went into the bedroom, and the paint job was even worse up close. Greta had painted over my nice light blue with this dark purple color that made the room feel tiny. The paint was sloppy with drips on the baseboards and spots she missed completely. Imogen pointed at the closet, and I opened it to find more of Greta's junk piled inside. We walked back out to the shed, and I opened it up. My furniture was there, but it was shoved in carelessly and some pieces were scratched. My fishing gear was in a heap in the corner, and when I picked up my favorite rod, I saw the handle was completely broken off. That rod cost me $200 and I'd had it for 6 years. I felt my face get hot with anger. Imogen put her hand on my shoulder and said we'd get through this together. On Monday, I called Austin and asked if he had time to talk about repairs. He said he'd been waiting for my call. He told me he felt terrible about getting involved with Greta's scheme even though he didn't know what was happening. He said he wanted to help fix everything at a discounted rate to make up for it. We talked through what needed to be done. The porch steps still needed proper repair because Greta never actually paid him to finish the job correctly. The bedroom needed to be repainted back to the original light blue. The floor had to be refinished in the spots where the stains were too deep to clean. Austin gave me a price that was really fair, and I told him to start whenever he could. He said he'd come up that Thursday and get going on the porch first. I spent my lunch break that day calling cleaning services. I found one that did deep cleaning for houses that had been empty for a long time or had damage. I explained the situation and they said they could handle it. They scheduled me for the following weekend and said it would take 2 full days to get the cabin properly clean. The price was $800, which made me wince, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't stand to be in that cabin with the way it smelled and looked right now. I gave them my credit card information and confirmed the appointment. That Saturday, I drove back up to the cabin to clean out the shed completely. I wanted to see exactly what Greta left behind and what I could salvage. I pulled everything out onto the grass and started sorting. My furniture was mostly okay except for some scratches that I could probably fix with wood polish. But then I found boxes that weren't mine. I opened them and found Greta's winter clothes, some books and a bunch of electronics, including what looked like an expensive laptop and a tablet. She'd been storing all this stuff and never came back for it when her brother picked up the rest. I took pictures of everything and then texted Greta's brother. I told him she had 1 week to come get this stuff, or I was donating all of it to charity. He texted back within minutes saying he'd let her know and he'd try to come get it himself this week. On Tuesday evening, my phone lit up with a message from Greta. It was the first time she'd contacted me directly since the night I changed the locks. The message was long and said she wanted to talk and maybe work things out. She said she never meant for any of this to go so far. She said she was just going through a really hard time and she made some bad choices. She said she missed our friendship and she hoped we could find a way past this. I read the message 3 times and then I remembered what Lynette told me. She said to maintain no contact with Greta except through legal channels if it became necessary. I didn't respond to the message. I didn't block her number yet because I wanted to have a record of anything else she might send, but I wasn't going to engage with her. That friendship was over, and nothing she said was going to change that. 3 weeks after I changed the locks, I finally had my first peaceful weekend at the cabin. The cleaning service had done an incredible job. The smell was completely gone and every surface was spotless. Austin finished the porch repairs and started on the bedroom paint. My furniture was back inside and arranged the way I originally had it. I woke up early on Saturday morning and made coffee in my old coffee maker that I'd missed using. I took my mug out to the newly repaired porch and sat in my chair watching the sun come up over the lake. The water was perfectly still and reflected the orange and pink sky. I felt the tension in my shoulders start to ease for the first time in months. This place was mine again. I didn't have to worry about Greta or what she was doing or when she'd finally leave. It was just me and the lake and the quiet morning air. Sunday afternoon, Imogen drove up with a big box in her passenger seat. She came onto the porch grinning and handed it to me. Inside was brand new fishing gear, including a rod that was even nicer than the one Greta broke. Imogen said she wanted to replace what got ruined, and she thought we should celebrate me getting my cabin back. We spent the afternoon out on the lake in my little boat just like we used to do before this whole nightmare started. The fish weren't biting much, but I didn't care. I was just happy to be there doing something normal and peaceful. When we got back to shore, Imogen told me she was proud of me. She said a lot of people would have just let Greta stay because dealing with it was too hard. She said I stood up for myself instead of letting someone walk all over me forever. I thanked her and we sat on the porch until the sun started going down. For the first time in almost a year, I felt like everything was going to be okay. The next afternoon, I got a text from Greta's brother. He said Greta wanted him to tell me she was sorry, and she was getting help for her issues. He said she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again. I read the message twice and felt something loosen in my chest. Part of me appreciated that she finally admitted she messed up. Part of me didn't care anymore because the damage was done. I texted back thanking him for letting me know. Then I opened my phone settings and blocked Greta's number. That friendship was over and I wasn't going to leave any door open for her to try coming back into my life. Some bridges you burn completely, and this was one of them. The weeks after that were busy with finishing the cabin repairs. Austin completed the bedroom repaint, and it looked exactly like it did before Greta touched it. The floors got refinished and the scratches disappeared. I replaced all the broken fishing gear and bought some new furniture to replace the pieces Greta had damaged beyond repair. Every weekend I drove up and worked on making the place feel like mine again. By early fall, the cabin looked better than it had in years. I'd even added some improvements like new curtains and a better lock system that made me feel more secure. 6 months after I changed those locks, I was sitting on my porch every single weekend without fail. The lake was calm, and the trees around the property had turned orange and yellow. I had my coffee in one hand and a book in the other, and absolutely nothing to worry about. The peace I felt was deeper than before because I'd fought for it. I learned that being nice doesn't mean letting people walk all over you forever. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is stand up and enforce your boundaries without feeling guilty about it. Greta taught me that lesson the hard way, but at least I learned it. My cabin was mine again, and nobody was ever going to take it from me.